The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 201 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is going on?
Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
You and I are about as busy as we can be this week.
We are.
We have so many different episodes out. We have this episode that we're getting ready to do right now for our unsolved folks. We have an episode out right now on TCAT about the murder of Bonnie Haim.
Yeah.
A lot of twists and turns in that one. You know, police suspected, I think pretty quickly, that the husband was involved, but it's a case that dragged on for 20 plus years before they put all the pieces of the puzzle together. We also have a new Patreon episode out on Walter Hill.
Well, that was a good one.
It was a good one. We're talking about, a 42-year-old guy who falls in love with a 13-year-old and, murdered a bunch of members of her family because they didn't want to let him marry her.
Shocking.
Shocking that they would want to in the first place.
How dare you marry someone of underage?
But it's a good episode. We've got some Patreon shout outs to give. We had Specs.
Hey, Specs.
Cindy Gamble.
What's going on, Cindy?
Crystal Stevens.
Hey, Crystal.
Artsy Aspie.
Well, a little AA.
Jennifer Lynn.
Hey, Jennifer.
Maddie.
What's going on, Maddie?
Skylar Crane.
Hey, Skylar.
Bob Bravo.
My buddy Bob Bravo.
Robin Trimborn.
Hey, Robin.
Maria Mazurski.
Hey, what's up, Mazurksi?
Elizabeth Sykes.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Allison Adams.
What's going on, Allison?
Pata Dendrige.
Whoa. Pata Dendrige.
That was very close.
Yeah.
Donna Salmon.
Hey, Donna.
Meg Follett.
What's going on, Meg?
Joy Joseph.
Hey, Joy.
Alice Keck.
Hey, Keck.
Ashley McAnulty.
I think it's Mick Ignotti.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
Kristen Smith.
Hey, Kristen.
Heather Van Lint.
What's going on, Heather?
Karen Harrison Keene.
Hey, Keen.
Kathy Anderson.
What's happening, Kathy?
And Bob Foley.
Hey, Bob.
So we appreciate that new support. And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Gabby.
Good old Gabby.
Gabby, Gibby, very close.
Very, very close.
We had some great PayPal donations from Catherine Belbin.
Hey, Catherine.
Leah Miller.
What's up, Leah?
Kathy Chase.
Hey, Kathy.
And Paula Motsney.
Good old Matzi.
So a lot of great support. We really appreciate it all.
We do.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We're on to part 2, the last part on the unsolved murders of the Grimes sisters. We definitely want to give a quick shout out to Lindsay Skolaric for her assistance with the research of this episode. In last week's episode, we discussed Barbara and Patricia's disappearance and the search to find the Grimes sisters. And we talked about a lot of different sightings throughout Chicago. There was the discovery of their bodies on January 22nd, 1957 by Leonard and Marie Prescott, just off the road in the town of Willow Springs. Barbara and Patricia's bodies were frozen, and there was no apparent cause of death. We talked about the autopsy and the controversy that surrounded it. One of the 3 medical examiners spoke up against the report days after it was released, and he was fired. The chief investigator and the Cook County medical examiner left the autopsy as it was initially, except that they changed the part about Barbara having casual sexual intercourse to state she had been sexually molested before her death.
That's a big difference.
It's a big difference. It's a huge difference. The girls were laid to rest, and the task force was looking for a young man named Bennie Bedwell. So there's our recap. Obviously, if you've not listened to part 1, I recommend going back to and doing that first.
Right.
But now it's on to part 2. And it really didn't take police all that long to find Bennie Bedwell. They located him on January 27th and brought him in for questioning early that morning. Bennie's real first name turned out to be Edward. He was 21 years old and was from Paris, Tennessee. It's interesting, Gibbs, how many states have a city named Paris?
There is.
It seems like almost every state has one.
Paris, Ohio.
And you can name one of them.
I can name one.
Yeah, that was great.
You got that Paris, France.
Bennie was known to be an illiterate drifter on Skid Row, working as a dishwasher at various restaurants. He did resemble Elvis in a way, and many girls found him attractive, at least according to Bennie. And, that always cracks me up, because I could say, well, according to me, back in the day, a lot of girls found me attractive. It just doesn't quite mean the same thing, Gibbs, when you say it about yourself, right?
It doesn't.
No. It always means more when another person or other people say it about you.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty hot back in the day. Doesn't pull it off.
It doesn't have the same weight. After extensive police questioning, Bennie was arrested and charged with the murders of Barbara and Patricia Grimes. The arrest followed his signing of a prepared statement on the afternoon of the 27th, in which he detailed out and confessed to the murders. A summary of the statement events reads as follows. On January 7th, Bennie met the sisters at the Herald's Club. They were with a man that he only knew as Frank. The four of them went to the Crest Hotel, where they paired off, and Patricia stayed with Bennie. On January 8th, the couples went to a Madison Street club and they drank. On January 9th, Frank and Barbara went to the West End Hotel. Bennie and Patricia went to a house on Washington Boulevard run by a woman named Lorraine. On the 10th, Bennie and Patricia went to the West End Hotel and they got a room. On the 11th and 12th, they all stayed 2 nights at 19 North Racine Avenue. And then on the 13th, the group left and went to a Madison Street club to drink again. Frank left and returned with a car. They all went for a ride, then to a restaurant, then drove and parked near where the bodies were later found. The group had all been drinking in the car, and then Bennie and Frank tried to have sex with Barbara and Patricia. They resisted, and there was a fight. Bennie hit Patricia on the chin harder than he meant to, killing her. At the same time, Frank hit Barbara, killing her as well. They disrobed the girls and dumped the bodies over the highway guardrail. After this, Bennie and Frank separated, and Frank took the girls' clothes.
So as you read these statements, I immediately think, according to Bennie, didn't they stay in several hotels and rooms together?
Yeah, so if I think I know where you're going, you're talking about sexual activity that occurred in all of these days leading up to the 13th. Was there any? Or did they just sleep in the same bed? It is strange to think that these 2 girls would stay in various hotels with these boys.
Right.
And then all of a sudden on the 13th, sexual activity is instigated. There's resistance, and that leads to a fight, which leads to their death.
Exactly. I mean, if these guys were going to make their move, why wait till you're in a car when you had the opportunities that led up to this moment?
Yeah, and it's not just the fact that Bennie says that they stayed at these hotels together.
Yeah.
They went out, they drank, They came back to the hotel. So, yeah, I think to your point, there were a number of opportunities in the 5 or 6 days prior to the 13th to initiate and have sexual activity with these girls. And if that had occurred, then it's hard to believe that then all of a sudden on the 13th, there's this massive amount of resistance that leads to their deaths. The chronology of events just doesn't seem to make sense on the surface as the way he's saying it.
I agree with you. And then I have a problem with, strange enough that he hit her in her chin too hard and it killed her. But at the same time, the other guy hit the other sister just as hard, killing her too. I find it strange that even one of them could do that, let alone both of them.
Yeah, because I don't know how many times a person has been hit on the chin and killed. Knocked out plenty of times.
Sure.
You know, you get hit on what they call the button, right?
Yeah.
Boxers or bare knuckle fighters or MMA guys or whatever. Knocked out, concussions when you fall down. A lot of that stuff can happen. But I've not heard of a lot of deaths, or I'm not aware of a lot of deaths occurring from people being punched on the chin.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it couldn't happen. It's just not something that you hear about a lot. It's not something that I'm aware of.
Well, look, I mean, I know we're not supposed to talk about it, but all those years you and I were in Fight Club.
Yes.
We did take a lot of hits to the chin, and we're still here.
And you took a lot of hits to the head.
I did take a lot of hits to the head.
That help explain some of your activities now, years later.
What were we just talking about?
But you broke rule number 1 already.
Did I talk? I didn't. I'm sorry. I don't know what I remember. I all those jars to my head has messed me up.
But, you know, in all seriousness, it's hard to go through the events of these days and think, yeah, all of this makes complete sense.
Right.
Now, maybe some of the days make sense on their own, but couple that with the 13th and the way that Benny explains those events transpired that led up to the girl's deaths, it's really hard to square it all. Benny told investigators that Frank was a small guy, about 5'9", weighed 150 pounds, with light brown hair. He was thought to be a salesman for a photography studio. The investigators needed to verify Benny's statements of events. They also needed to find this Frank guy. On that same day, January 27th, investigators spoke to the Harold's Club's owner, a guy by the name of Harold Perlman. They also spoke to his bartender, Fred Russo. Both confirmed that Benny had not been in the club on January 7th, as he stated. Now, they did say Benny frequented the club. He just wasn't there on that night. The bartender did say that Benny and another man, matching Frank's description, came into the club sometime towards the end of December with 2 girls that in no way matched the description of the Grimes sisters, but the bartender asked them to leave because the girls were too young to drink. Investigators received another confirmation of Benny and another man with 2 girls who matched the same description that Frank Russo gave, trying to drink at the Greenfront Tavern towards the end of December. Now, Gibbs, we have no idea who these girls are, but it's safe to say by the different descriptions that were given, they did not resemble the Grimes sisters at all. They were described as having a darker complexion.
Right.
And we know, and I think we even said it in episode 1, that the Grimes sisters had very fair complexions. Investigators went to the Crest Hotel and spoke with Leroy Williams. Williams was a bellboy who said that Benny had stayed there several times with different girls, but after looking at pictures of the Grimes sisters, he told them he had never seen them at the hotel.
So, right now, Benny's confession's just falling apart to me.
So far, there's not a single thing that investigators have found that is confirming his story. And I think pretty quickly, they started to doubt Benny's confession. And Loretta Grimes was pretty vocal from the very beginning that she did not believe Bennie Bedwell had anything to do with the murders of her daughters, because according to her, her girls would not hang out with men, going to clubs, drinking, and staying in hotels with them.
Yeah, I think to Loretta, her girls were good girls. This is not something she would ever consider her girls would do.
Well, and let's not forget, they were 15 and 13 years old. So we have to keep that in mind. I think bottom line, Gibbs, Benny's story and timeline of events, it just didn't add up. It didn't match the autopsy results. For one thing, he told investigators that the girls ate hot dogs before their deaths. No hot dogs were found in either of the girls' stomach contents. And if the girls had been drinking, the toxicology report would have shown that, which it didn't.
No, and according to Benny, they were drinking a lot.
Investigators even had Benny take them on a tour of the different places that he mentioned in his confession to get a better understanding of what he claimed happened. Apparently, the tour took over 3 hours and took them as far as 50 miles from where he met the girls and where he said they were killed. On the same day that Benny gave his confession, in the town of Cicero, Illinois, local police were holding a man in custody that matched the description sent out by the task force of Frank. This man's name was Richard Whitmire. He was 28 years old and was picked up earlier for threatening a waitress. And not only did he match the description, but he also had Benny's number on a wall calendar inside his apartment. He told investigators that he knew Benny from the times they had worked together as dishwashers. He told them they were friends, but when investigators disclosed what Benny had told them, I think Richard kind of backed away from that and said, you know what? We're really not that good of friends.
Yeah, I think I'd back away really quick too. Like, wait a minute. He said we did what? No.
I think he began to distance himself from Benny, saying, we're more of acquaintances than friends. But investigators knew Richard was lying about the friendship because they found a letter in his apartment telling his mother he planned on staying with Benny for the weekend. Richard Whitmire told investigators he didn't do anything Benny said he had done. He was with Benny and two girls during that time, but his memories were hazy from all the drinking that he did. Eventually, these two girls that we keep talking about surfaced. Their names were Irene and Carol, and they came forward as alibis for Richard Whitmire. They stated that they were with him and Benny during the time of the murders.
We say it's an alibi for Richard, but really it's also an alibi for Benny.
Yeah, if they were together with these two girls at the same time, at the time that the murders were thought to have occurred, then yeah, you're right. It's an alibi for both men. The investigators went back to Benny and told him what they had learned from Richard. Benny quickly said Frank was not Richard. Instead, he was a friend named William Cole Willingham. Investigators interviewed Willingham, who confirmed that he was with Benny and two girls, but the girls were not the Grimes sisters, and he didn't murder anyone.
They are all over the place.
Yeah, I'm confused at this point.
Yeah.
Because you essentially have three different men, two of them saying they were with Benny.
Yeah.
All of them saying they were with these two girls.
I'm just saying, for a dishwasher, Benny's doing all right.
I think they all seem to be doing okay. Yeah. But I think just as we're scratching our heads trying to, understand this, the police had to be as well. Because it's like a flood of information, but the information is so conflicting.
Yeah.
That
it's like, who's on first?
Yeah. It's like, what does it mean? On January 31st, at a hearing, Bennie's attorney told the judge that Bennie had been coerced into signing the confession by police. He said the police told him that he would only be charged with disorderly conduct if he admitted to the killings. He said he signed the statement because, quote, I was scared and they told me about getting off easy. He also told the judge that the police brought him in sooner than what they stated and held him for many days with no attorney.
That's one way to wear somebody down, to get them to sign something.
It is, and it's something that we've seen in a number of false confessions.
Yeah. And I think back in the 50s in Chicago, it probably happened quite often.
More than we would like to think it did. Now, it was also mentioned by Bennie's attorney that Bennie had a low intellectual level and should have never been questioned alone. And Gibbs, that's a trend that you and I keep seeing in a number of cases that we've done, right? Intense interrogation over long periods of time. The person being questioned has or is operating at a low intellectual level. They're being kept from sleep. They might not be provided with food on a regular basis.
Yeah.
We keep seeing this over and over. And the next thing you know, there's a confession.
Look, even somebody like me with Mensa, you put me with no food, no water, or a little bit of water, no food, no sleep for 3 days. I'm telling you right away, I'm the one that did Hoffa. I know exactly where he's at. I did Hoffa.
Did you just say you have Mensa? Like that's a thing? I thought it was an organization that you belonged to.
No, I own them now, man.
You own it?
I took it over.
Dude, you would roll on anyone for a Clark bar. Let's not kid ourselves. Come on now.
I do like a good Clark bar.
But we're joking about that piece. What's not a joke is just how often this seems to come up.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Involving these false confessions or what later are determined to be false confessions.
You know, because it not only does it hurt the individual that gave the false confession, it also hurts the case.
Yeah, it definitely hurts the investigation because if you've got someone that is confessing to the crime, are you out running down this lead or that lead? Maybe not. Yeah. Maybe you're solely focused on running down what this individual's talking about to the exclusion of other things that may pertain to the real killer.
Yeah. And it could potentially discredit anything in the future because you had this person that you said did it, that you agreed to their confession. Now, could it discredit whoever you arrest at a later date? It could.
Well, at the very least, a defense attorney is going to bring it up.
Sure. Yeah.
How can my client be guilty when Bennie Bedwell confessed to the crime?
Yeah.
At this same hearing, Loretta Grimes walked over to Bennie's mother and said she never thought he did this and that she was sorry he had to go through this ordeal.
Well, that's a heck of a thing to do.
Well, it is, and I think it shows you how adamant she was that Bennie Bedwell was not the person that the police should be looking for.
Yeah.
He was not the person responsible for the murders of her daughters. And when it came down to it, the state just didn't have the evidence to hold Bennie. So on February 6th, the judge released him on a $20,000 bond. Bennie's attorney threatened a lawsuit if all the charges were not dropped. And Bennie's hometown of Paris, Tennessee, offered him a job with good pay to return home. So after some further investigation and others providing an alibi for Bennie, his charges were dropped. Around this same time, investigators received another lead. 2 witnesses driving through Barbara and Patricia's neighborhood said they saw the girls playing in the doorways of houses. It was as if they were trying to hide and then jump out and scare each other while walking toward their home. Earl Zastro and Edward Lorden said they saw the girls about 2 blocks from the girls' home at 11:30 p.m. on December 28th. So there's some interesting things here, right? Investigators have all of these conflicting reports about the girls' whereabouts that night, pretty much all over the city. A lot of it we talked about in episode 1. Now, there are witnesses that have the girls in their own neighborhood later that night, 11:30, somewhere around there. That makes it seem as though the girls left the movie theater, maybe got off the bus, and were headed towards their home when something happened.
But with all these conflicting reports, it just made the job for the police so much harder.
Yeah, you said conflicting reports, and that's exactly right. A lot of these sightings or these reported sightings, they're basically contradicting each other in a lot of ways.
Because like you said, if the girls actually were walking down their neighborhood street at 11:30, then you would want to start investigating the fact that they were kidnapped out of their neighborhood.
Yeah, I think your investigation then moves much closer to home.
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking that, okay, they left the movie theater, but they never made it to their neighborhood. So that's, I think, to this point where the police have probably most likely been concentrating.
Yeah. Because at that point, it's going to either open or close your pool of persons of interest.
If you can figure out which of these are correct or true or accurate.
And that's the problem.
It is. It's a big problem. Because if you can't, then your pool just stays wide open. On February 6, 1957, Loretta typed a letter and she sent it to the Chicago PD. The letter read, "All of the authorities I know have given up time away from their families and worked long hours to help find out how my darlings died and who did this to my daughters. I have not slept and cannot sleep and will not sleep until someone has the right answers to this terrible thing that happened to my darling girls. Please, please never give up. Promise me you never will. You must solve this, not only for me, but also to make it safe for all the children in the city. The answer to this terrible thing must be found, even if it takes months or years. Please, please never forget. Please never give up. Keep on working, and I'll keep on praying. I'll pray for you too."
That's a rough letter.
It's rough. It's heartbreaking. But I also think at some level, Gibbs, it's very smart on the part of Loretta Grimes. You do not want the police to give up. You don't want the attention, the interest in this case to wane, because once it does, then resources get reallocated. There's less people working the case. I think as a good investigator, a good police officer, you read this letter and it seeps into you.
Yeah, it motivates you.
How can it not?
Yeah. The other part of this letter that really got to me, though, as I was reading it, I kept on thinking, I know she never would ever think that it would be 2021 and we still don't have any answers.
Oh, yeah. I get what when she's writing this letter in 1957.
Yeah.
No, there's no way. She's saying months, maybe years.
Right. Not decades.
Not over half a century.
Yeah.
Sadly, Loretta had received several threatening phone calls during the investigation, but there was one in particular that she told investigators about right after she received it. In May of 1957, Loretta received an anonymous call from someone who claimed to have killed her daughters. According to the Chicago Tribune, she told the police that what really got to her was when the caller said, "I know something about your little girl that no one else knows, not even the police." The smallest girl's toes were crossed at the feet. The caller then laughed and hung up. And this was true. Now, of course, the police knew. that what the caller had said was true, they found the body. An autopsy had been done, but the general public would not have known this. So I think for Loretta, she had to wonder, was this really the killer? Or was this just some sick individual that had somehow found out this information about her daughter? We've seen that happen quite a bit.
Sure.
And we're always disgusted by, you're disgusted by what happened.
Sure.
Obviously, the murders. But then you have individuals who seem to take delight in tormenting the family members of the victims. It's sick. It's
really
twisted.
Is. I don't even know how that gets their rocks off. Why would you want to do that to anybody knowing what they are currently going through?
Because some people are really twisted like that. I don't understand it. You don't understand it. And the problem with it, Gibbs, is police just never had a way to identify this person, the caller. And I think the information that the caller gave about Patricia's feet could have been obtained in any number of ways. Somebody at the police department told somebody who then told somebody else, or the medical examiner was talking over dinner, and that information can get out in a number of different ways.
Well, heck, if you ever went swimming with her, seen her at a pool.
Well, that's true too.
There's so many different possibilities.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people that probably knew about that while she was alive because they knew her and they had seen her and without shoes on.
If you ever see me at the pool, you realize that I have that one thing going on.
Yeah, I wish you just had one thing going on.
Yeah, I know it's disturbing.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
The city of Chicago was hit hard again on Friday, August 16th, 1957. A 15-year-old named Judith Mae Anderson was walking home from a girlfriend's house, but never made it home and was never seen alive again. And the city of Chicago PD, they didn't waste any time. Hundreds of officers were dispatched to search for Judith. On Thursday, August 22nd, a body without a head or arms was found in a steel drum in the Montrose Harbor. Days later, on Saturday, August 24th, a head and some arms were found nearby. All of the body parts were identified as Judith Anderson. She had been shot in the head 4 times. The Chicago Tribune offered up a $50,000 reward.
This case was almost as big as the Grimes sisters case. There was a lot of attention to this case back in the day.
Yeah, it's a big case in its own right, and I know we'll cover it in a future episode of Unsolved, but I think we have to mention it here, right? You know, on the heels of the Grimes sisters, this is another tragic murder of a young girl. And I don't know how the residents of Chicago wouldn't have put this together. I'm not saying, you know, these murders were all committed by the same person, but the panic levels got to go up a few notches.
I think you were probably keeping your kids a little closer to home at this point.
I think people in the community of Chicago, Cook County, they were upset. You know, and I think any town or community is going to be upset when you have a string of unsolved murders like this, especially involving young people, upset and then also scared and all of that goes along with it. You know, first you had the 1955 murders of John and Anton Schussler and their friend Robert Peterson, followed up by the murders of Barbara and Patricia, and then this murder of Judith Anderson. I think as a community, you're looking to law enforcement and saying, I don't care what it takes. You need to find out who murdered these victims. Then on November 15th, 1958, 15-year-old Bonnie Lee Scott was found murdered just a few miles from where Barbara and Patricia Grimes had been found dead. Bonnie had been abducted on September 22nd and found less than 2 months later. She was nude and had been stabbed to death and also decapitated.
Brutal.
Yeah, I mean, all the murders are brutal, but when you look at these last two, wow, I mean, decapitation, limbs being cut off. I mean, really extremely nasty stuff.
Yeah, because these are kids. These are kids that this is happening to.
On November 16th, the day after Bonnie Scott was found, Loretta received a phone call from a man who claimed responsibility for Bonnie's murder. He said, "I've committed another perfect crime. This is another one those cops won't solve, and they're not going to blame Bedwell or Barry Cook." Loretta was sure that this was the same person who called her back in May of 1957. And I think this name Barry Cook is interesting, Gibbs. Barry Cook came up as a potential suspect or a person of interest in a lot of these cases. The Grimes sisters case, Judith Anderson's murder, and the murder of Margaret Gallagher. I don't think there's any doubt. Barry Cook was a monster towards women.
Just another bad individual that we keep finding when we do cases like this.
Yeah, because in October of 1958, he gave a full confession to the murder of Margaret Gallagher. He said he murdered her while she was sunbathing. But police were never able to connect him to the Grimes sisters' murders or the murder of Judith Anderson. But we have to go back to Bonnie Scott's murder because eventually police arrested a man named Charles Melquist. He admitted to Bonnie's murder and told them that he revisited her body multiple times. And it was during one of these visits to the body that he cut off her head.
What a disturbing guy, man. Seriously. And I know we've covered cases like this before where they do that. They go back and they revisit the bodies.
How many killers on TCAT have we talked about that had this obsession of going back multiple times?
Right.
And, sometimes there was sexual perversion involved. Sometimes it was this, sometimes it was that, but it's a real thing with some of these killers. Now, I think where the murder of the Grimes sisters and the murder of Bonnie Scott intersect is that police made some connections between their murders. But Melquist was never questioned about the Grimes sisters. According to an article in Chicago Now written by Ray Johnson, Ray Johnson was known as the Chicago history cop. And he and others in law enforcement close to this case believe that Charles Melquist murdered the Grimes sisters. Apparently, Charles was known to call people and harass them over the phone, and he tried to lure his victims over the phone. The Grimes neighbors' names and phone numbers were in his black book. The Army also trained Charles on how to render people unconscious.
If you're going to kidnap somebody, that's a good tool to know how to use.
Yeah, it would be, because not from personal experience, but I imagine so much easier to control somebody, to move them around, put them in a trunk, do whatever when they're unconscious versus them being awake and trying to fight you the whole time. Inside the trunk of Charles Melquist's car, police found a 3-pronged garden fork that could have been used to make the 3 holes in Patricia's chest. Also, a neighbor recalled seeing Melquist around the Grimes home the day that the girls went to the movies. Okay, there's a lot of smoke here surrounding Charles Melquist. I wouldn't say there's fire. I wouldn't say that we've talked about anything that would definitively make you think, yes, he was absolutely involved. But there's a lot of things here that make you question, why wasn't he looked at harder?
Absolutely.
Why didn't police talk to him, question him, grill him?
Dig in deeper on this one.
Yeah, dig in deeper about the murder of the Grimes sisters. Charles Melquist was found guilty of the murder of Bonnie Scott and received a 99-year sentence. But he was released after serving only 11 years.
Now let's hold on here a minute.
You have a problem with somebody getting out 88 years early?
Yeah. I don't understand it. I know we talk about it in a lot of the episodes, but he kidnapped a young girl, killed her, went back, decapitated her, and you're telling me he's just going to go to prison for 11 years. That's it. 11 years. That's almost as old as she was. She was like 15 years old. He only did 11 years. He didn't even do her age in prison.
It's kind of hard to stomach how you go from a 99-year sentence, which I'm totally fine with.
Yeah.
Because what this guy did was absolutely horrible, to finding out that he was released after 11 years. Then add on top of that, he got married. He had some children of his own. He had a family. He lived his life.
Guess who didn't get to live their life? Bonnie.
Melquist died in 2010, never giving up any information about any murders that he might have possibly been involved in, including the murders of the Grimes sisters. Over the 64 years since the murders of Barbara and Patricia Grimes, there have been a number of names that have surfaced as possible suspects. Names like Kenneth Hansen, who was found guilty in 1995 of killing John and Anton Schuschler and their friend Robert Peterson. Hansen worked for Silas Jane at his stables, and Silas Jane is a name that is mentioned by some as a possibility as well. We talked about Silas in episode 1 and his role in the famous Helen Brock disappearance. Max Flagg was another person of interest in the murder of the Grimes sisters. He was only 17 years old at the time they were murdered, and because of his age, he was protected by an Illinois law which prevented juveniles from being subjected to polygraph tests. But Flagg ended up taking a polygraph anyway. When he was tricked into it by an investigator, during the polygraph test, the investigator got him to confess to the murders of the Grimes sisters without an attorney or his parents present. The confession and polygraph test were declared unusable. Because of the manner in which it was received, it was deemed to be illegal under state law. Flagg was released and never really pursued after that. But he did later go to jail for the murder of a young woman.
So again, another bad individual. But could he have been the real killer?
Or could he have been coerced into a confession like other people we've talked about? I don't know. And I think it's one of the reasons why so many people have been fascinated by this case over the years. There's a lot of different people that you could look at and say, well, that person's interesting as it relates to, being a person of interest, or, they have some tie here or there. There's just never been that one piece of evidence, right, to ever conclusively say that, yep, this person did it.
Yeah, because at this point, we've got a couple people that have confessed to the murders that were never prosecuted.
Yeah, but again, I have to ask that question, how valid were the confessions? I think definitely in the case of Bennie Bedwell, you can just throw that confession out the window. I think it's pretty much been proven that it was completely false. I don't know about this guy. I think the one thing you can say is that based off of what he was later charged with, he had the capacity.
Sure he did.
For murder, obviously, because he committed one. Donald Roy Kaufman, a 33-year-old aircraft inspector for the Ford Motor Company, was a known child kidnapper and molester with a record of sexual attacks on both boys and girls. On September 1st, 1957, Kaufman was arrested for kidnapping 10-year-old Patricia Powers from Palos Park. Patricia eventually escaped and led the police back to the apartment where she had been held captive and molested. The police found a .22 caliber handgun and rifle and many pairs of worn girls' and women's underwear. Kaufman was questioned about the Grimes sisters' murders and the murder of Judith Anderson, as well as the 3 boys in 1955. He passed 2 polygraphs on those cases. Kaufman was also a prime suspect in the 1948 slaying of 10-year-old Roberta Renierson. In 1950, he was found guilty of kidnapping and the sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl and a 15-year-old boy. For that, he was sentenced to 6 years in a state mental hospital. During the investigation of the Grimes sisters' murders and the search for their killer, over 300,000 people were questioned, and over 2,000 people were subjected to pretty serious interrogation. And I think, Gibbs, those are pretty high numbers. We've also talked about quite a few people who were operating in and around this time frame who have been connected in some way or another as possible suspects in the murders, just like in every case we do, right? There are a lot of bad people running around doing very bad things at the same time in the same area.
It used to really shock me. I don't really get shocked anymore.
No, you shouldn't be, because we find it in the research of every case we do. It's just so commonplace. And I hate to use that word, but it is for us because we see it time and time again.
I know that in the past, you've experienced it, I've experienced it. We're started off with this one case, and we find this other bad individual, and we end up doing a case on that person. You know, we veer off and we keep going because it's just so much information.
You know, as we wrap up this episode on the Grimes sisters' murders, this is such an old case now. Now, Chicago police still have it as an open case, but it's so old, over 60 years ago that these murders occurred. Is it possible that someday police will know who did it? I think that's the question. You know, it's possible. You never would rule that out. My thought is it's going to be very hard to be definitive about it. I think, you know, you can get to the point where someone comes forward and you know, offers up some information that really shines some light on the case, but would it ever be enough to convict somebody? And what are the chances that this person or persons are still alive? I mean, even if it was a young person who perpetrated these murders, let's say 16, 17 years old, they'd be 80, 81 years old by now.
Yeah, right.
So, like I say, it's never out of the realm of possibility, but with each passing year, the chances get slimmer and slimmer. Right. Now, technology gets better and better.
Yeah.
So you have these two kind of things competing against each other.
Can technology rush up a little quicker
and beat the passing time?
Right.
I think that's always the question in some of these really, really old cases. But that's it, Gibbs, for our coverage of the unsolved murders of the Grimes sisters. No doubt, tough case for the family, for the community, you know, not to have this solved for so many years. Add on top of this all of the other murders that we talked about of young people. I think if you were a mother in the late 50s in the area, now Chicago's a big area.
Sure it is.
But in the areas where these murders were occurring, you had to be a little bit more protective of a young daughter, especially with all of these horrible facts coming out about, what happened to these young girls.
You would have had your kids on lockdown.
Oh, there's no doubt. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, this is Nate calling from Columbus, Ohio. Just wanted to thank you guys for doing what you do. You get me through my days at work. Mike, sorry about your Kentucky Wildcats this year. And Gibby, take your vitamins. We need you in 2021. Keep it up, guys. Thanks again.
Very succinct and very accurate voicemail.
Yeah.
My Kentucky Wildcats are sorry this year.
They are.
They're darn near unwatchable.
Yeah.
This is a year unlike anything I've ever experienced, and I'm 47 years old. It's been rough on me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, you have not been happy.
I've not been happy.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Elisa from Colorado Springs. I was going to leave a voicemail yesterday after I heard my Patreon shout out because I was waiting for you to both mispronounce my name. It's Elisa like Mona Lisa without the M-O-N in front. But I freaked out because I was listening to a shout out from the lady, or a voicemail from the lady yesterday, and she was freaked out because she had her sister's name and I think her mom's name that were before hers, and the lady before my shout out was Kimberly, which is my mom's name, and the lady after me was Dawn, which are our middle name. And so I finished the episode, heard the voicemail, and it freaked me out that it was the exact same experience. I also want to thank you from Colorado Springs for covering Gannon's case. It really struck a chord being so close to my hometown, and he deserves justice. So thank you for telling his story. I am team all of the Mikes, plus it's my boyfriend's name, so I guess I'm a little bit biased. Thank you for everything, and stay safe and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you for being a supporter of the show. Yeah, Gannon's story was a tough one.
Yeah, it really was.
That one, I'm sure hit hard for those people who experienced it, in that area, but it was rough on you and I.
It was.
That one is one that kind of sticks with me.
And still active in the news with some developments with the stepmom.
Yep.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, this is Christine calling from Wisconsin. I was calling today because it is the 1-year anniversary of when I started listening to your podcast. I first started only listening to the TCAT because I don't like Unsolved. But in April, my teenage daughter, I got her started, and then she started listening to the Unsolved. So I started listening to the Unsolved so that I could get ahead of her just in case there's an episode that I didn't want her to hear or in case she had questions. But we have been enjoying the podcast. When she's at her dad, she takes notes on the podcast so that when she's at my house, we can go over it and she has the information to go over it. But I thought I'd call and just say you guys are wonderful. Being with you guys for a year, I'm almost to the point where I know almost what Gibby will say before he says it. So I feel like I'm part of the conversation. Keep doing a great job and keep your own time ticking. Thanks. Bye.
Are you saying I'm predictable?
I don't know. I wish I knew what you were going to say. I have no idea.
If you only could do that.
I know. I think what's awesome is, taking notes, comparing, being able to have a bond over something.
Yeah.
Is awesome with your child. The fact that it's our thing.
We love that.
We love that. But, anytime you can find something where you can share a common interest with your child, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because it's not always easy to do. It's something I struggle with.
Yeah. But I know when you do find that, you love that with your girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. With my girls, my youngest and I share the Kentucky Wildcats. We both like to watch the basketball games together. And my older daughter and I, we play some games on the Xbox together. But, it's hard. They're girls. They're into makeup. I don't wear that much. A little concealer now and then.
You toned it down.
I've toned it down.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike and Gibby, this is JB Sinclair, and I just want to say that I love that my shout-out was on Valentine's Day, because I absolutely adore your podcast, both True Crime Unsolved and True Crime All the Time. So keep up the good work. You guys are cracking me up. And Gibby, I'm not part of the Sinclair Paint family, but thanks for the little shout-out there. Do keep up the good work. Keep your own time ticking.
Love it. Thanks, JB. Yeah, Gibby always thinks that our listeners are part of some famous family.
They are.
I mean,
they just don't want to say it out loud.
I think so too. I think
it.
People are just trying to be modest.
It's cool. We'll keep it down the down low. Don't worry.
You keep out there. You say keep it on the DL.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.